Hey everyone, I hope that you are doing well. We are continuing our journey through 4th edition as though it was just released. So we're going through all the materials as they're released and kind of looking at them with an eye towards someone who's a new player to Dungeons & Dragons and has never played it before, as well as people coming from older editions of the game and are learning 4th edition for the first time and seeing what it has to offer. So kind of trying to ignore things that would come later for the most part, though some of the things we will talk about, we'll kind of mention some of the things that did come later, and also trying to, set right some of the things that maybe you've heard about 4th edition since it was released and some of that stuff, and kind of show you what actually it has and see if that's if that helps you decide if you want to try to play the game. So, but my original plan with this particular video was to go through the classes in some detail. I was thinking I was debating about whether to do a different video for each class or whether to try to cover all of them in one, like I did with the races. And ultimately, I've decided that that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through this video. We will do kind of an overview of all the different classes that are available. I'm not going to do in-depth looking at the different powers that you have available or all the different features that you get. We'll provide kind of a high-level look at the different classes and the types of things that class would do during the game to really just kind of give you an idea of whether or not that would be the class that you would be after and some of the key things you want to be looking for. So, in the future, I will go through another video where we'll go into classes in great detail. Maybe that will be some character creation videos where we actually create a character and we look in depth at some of the powers and what some of those options that you have and how those might look on the battlefield and things like that. But for now, let's take a look at the classes at a higher level. And what I really want to emphasize is how the structure of the book really helps you as you're trying to decide what class you want, because it's a very consistent format, much like we saw with the races. And so the difficulty of creating a character of a certain class is really reduced from what you might have in some of the other editions of the game if you're coming from another edition. And certainly if you're brand new to Dungeons & Dragons, it's very approachable because of the way that they've set this up with these rules. You get the different flavor of the different classes and the different types of things that they can do, but the way that you build the character and really the way that you play the character for the most part is pretty similar. So you're not having to learn a different set of rules for every different class. You can really just focus on what you want the class to do, and the rules are more or less the same. We'll talk a little bit about some of the differences as we go through it. So, but let's take a look at what we have just before we really jump into it. So there are 8 classes in the player's handbook. There's the Cleric, the Fighter, the Paladin, the Ranger, the Rogue, the Warlock, the Warlord, and the Wizard. And those classes are broken up into 4 different roles. And we talked a little bit about roles in one of the prior videos. The clerics and the warlords are the leaders. And that doesn't mean that they're the ones in charge. So you wouldn't necessarily, if you were to choose a cleric or a warlord, it doesn't mean that you're going to be the one that's having to make the decisions for the group. What it means is that those are the characters that are going to be working to put the other characters in the best position to succeed. So this would be by providing healing or providing things that would give them bonuses or give their enemies some disadvantages, things like that. And so that's what the leaders are going to do. It's focused on trying to make the entire party succeed through the actions that they're taking. Then the fighters and the paladins are your defenders, and they're, as you would expect them to be, they are at the front lines. They're the ones putting themselves in between danger and the rest of the party. They usually have the highest constitution scores, the highest armor classes. They're fighting in melee. So those are the tough folks that you have that are doing the attacks and trying to do as much damage in melee combat as they can. The Rangers, Rogues, and Warlocks are the strikers. And they will focus on dealing lots of damage. They're not necessarily as strong as your fighters and your paladins, but they do deal a fair amount of damage. That can be in melee, or it can be as ranged attacks. from a distance. But their main thing that they're kind of doing is they're kind of moving around the battlefield. They're kind of keeping the enemy off balance. And you'll see that with some of the powers that they have, that they're really about kind of shifting and causing some confusion, and then dealing some quick attack, and then being able to move out of the way. So that's what you'll see with your strikers. And then the last role is the controller, which is the wizard. There's only one controller in this player's handbook, is the wizard. And the controller is about dealing with lots of, I'll say creatures, because it's not necessarily enemies. It could be allies as well. You'll see that they've got area bursts and close bursts and things like that that are going to deal damage, or maybe provide some healing or a bonus to a whole group of creatures that are in range for them. So that's the 4 roles. And when you think about that, when you go through that, you can kind of see how having the roles helps you to make sure you've got a pretty good mix of characters in your party. So if you're covering all those bases, then you're going to have a pretty solid party to do all the different things that you need to do. And then you can double up on some of them, and the book even tells you which ones to double up on first. And there's nothing about the roles that does anything really for the characters. It doesn't change the character itself. It's just kind of giving you a guide to let you know that these are the roles that the different types of characters play, so that you can more easily try to build that well-rounded party. And as we've said before, in prior editions of Dungeons and Dragons, as you're building the party, you would hear people say things like, do we have a healer yet? Do we have a thief? Do we have a spellcaster? And these are the same questions. Now, for 4th edition, instead of necessarily asking those questions, so you could ask the same questions because it still fits, you would say, do we have a leader? Do we have a defender, a striker, or a controller? What is our party mix? So it's just a way to help the party make sure that you're covering all the different bases, be as well-rounded as you can. You can run the game as much as leaning into that as much as you want. You could have parties that are, very heavy on one role or another, and, you just got to adapt the campaign to fit that. That's completely up to you, just as with any other version of the game. So, we get onto a tangent with roles, because it is definitely one of those sensitive topics with some folks. So, but that's really what it is. It's just a tool to help you build a well-rounded party. So what I want to do is, I'm not going to go through every single class in detail here. What I want to focus on is the structure of the book and what you get when you look at a class and you're trying to assess whether that's a class that you want to play. And, so we can see what that information looks like, and really want to stress how consistent it is and how easy it is to play pretty much any one of these characters. And we'll dig a little bit into some of the details of each class, so you can kind of get a feel for what they do. And then we'll circle back in another video where we'll focus more on individual classes. But for now, let's jump in and start looking at some of these classes. I'll flip over my other screen here. And the logical thing would be for me to start with the Cleric, because it is alphabetically the first class in the book, but I'm not going to do that. I am instead going to jump to the Warlord, because the Warlord is a new class for 4th edition, and it didn't really persist outside of 4th edition, at least in name. And so since it is really unique to 4th edition, I figured it would be a good place to start to get our look at the structure of these pages that you get. Every class in the book has about 15 pages worth of content that you're looking at. I know in one of the previous videos, there was a comment talking about how, that kind of takes the place of in other books, you have a lot of pages taken up with spells, but here, all of the information you need for your specific class is inside that section about your class. So you don't have to flip around to different parts of the book to get the information about your class. All your power information for your class is going to be in the same chapter, and you can kind of put a post-it note on there, and there you go. And you're pretty much set. I mean, obviously there may be other things with your equipment and with feats, but you don't have the issue of the spells, at least, where you got to flip to a different spot and figure out which spells are appropriate for you. So let's take a look at the Warlord. And looking at this page, you can see that it's very similar to how the races were set up, in that you have a box that really kind of summarizes the class traits. And then the following pages then go into detail about what those traits mean. So if you're looking at a Warlord, you can see right away that it is a leader role. Its power source is martial. So the other leader we have is a cleric who has a divine power source. This one is martial, which indicates that you're going to be doing a little more melee type combat things. And then we have the key abilities, and the key abilities are really important as you're building your character, because you're going to have ability scores that you're going to assign to your character, and you will choose which ability scores go where. And this is helping you by saying, in order, strength is the most important thing, followed by intelligence, followed by charisma for the Warlord. If you want to play a Warlord, those are the most important. It doesn't say you have to build your character that way. You can go against type and assign your ability scores however you want. But when you look at the powers, you will see that the powers are going to use strength, and they're going to use intelligence, and they're going to use charisma. So if you're trying to build a character that can take the most advantage of those, then you'll want to make sure that you think about those abilities with your highest or put the highest ability scores in those areas. Then you got your armor proficiencies, your weapon proficiencies. These are the armor and weapons that you have trained with and you know how to use. And so you will get a proficiency bonus. When you look at the equipment table, it'll tell you what the proficiency bonus is for those things. And then if you are proficient in that armor or that weapon, you will get to add that bonus to your score on your character sheet. Some of the other classes will also show an implement. So like a cleric will have a holy symbol, and a wizard will have wands and staffs and things like that. So if you are proficient in those, then when you're using those powers that indicate that it's an implement, you will get to add that proficiency bonus as well. So the Warlord does not have an implement listed here. Then you have bonus to defense. Every class is going to have a bonus that you get to one or more defenses. In this case, the Warlord will get a +1 to fortitude and a +2 to will. So that'll help when you're building your character, to give you a little bit of extra defense protection in those areas. The next part is talking about hit points. And I should say, everything that we're looking at here, you'll see it when we go to the other classes. This is the same format that you're going to follow for all the classes. That doesn't mean all the classes are the same. It just means structurally the information that you use to build the class is the same, so that it helps you and it makes it easy, so that any class you want to play, you'll be able to follow the same structure and build your character. And it's just as easy no matter which one you're choosing. This next part here talks about hit points and healing surges, and it's probably worth an entire video to talk about hit points and healing surges, because there's so much stuff that goes into that. Now, if you're coming from another edition of Dungeons and Dragons or some other role-playing game, then healing and hit points, those are dealt differently in other role-playing games. In Dungeons and Dragons, they were also dealt with a little differently, where you had hit dice, and then at every level you would roll your hit die and get a certain amount of new hit points at every level. 4th edition definitely changed that. When it comes to healing, it's also different in the sense that in prior editions, you would roll a die to indicate you'd roll like a 1d4 and maybe add a bonus to it to determine how many hit points you recover if you were to use like a potion of healing or or some sort of healing spell or something like that. But 4th edition changed that. So at first level, you're going to get some number plus your constitution score as your starting hit points. And then at every level, you get a certain number that's indicated here of how many you get. So if you're a level 4 Warlord, at every level after first level, you're going to get 5 more hit points. So it's pretty straightforward. You'd get 12 plus your constitution score at first level. And then for the 3 levels after that, you would get a total of 15 more hit points on top of that for your 4th level. Healing surges, without going into too much detail, you have a certain number of healing surges. And in this case, for the Warlord, it's 7 plus your constitution modifier. And that's the number of healing surges you can spend per day. And there's lots of different ways that you can spend those healing surges. That could be a potion of healing. It could be a power that somebody uses. It could be your second wind. It could be you're taking a rest, and you get to spend those healing surges. And there is a surge value that we will look at when we build characters that determines how much you recover. And it's a flat thing. It's not a die. It's just a flat number that is your healing surge value. And when you spend a healing surge, that's how many hit points you recover. If you're using a power to recover the hit points, usually with that power, there might be some additional hit points you get to recover on top of whatever the healing surge value would be. We'll look at that whenever we get around to looking at some of those powers. So, but that's, so that's kind of a different thing in 4th edition, the way that it does hit points and the way that it does healing. If you're coming from another edition, that might be different for you. It's not terribly complicated. It's not like a complete overhaul. It's not like similar to what I saw in Daggerheart, where it's, there's a whole different type of thing. And, so they took a different approach. Other games have different approaches. This is still kind of in the same style that you've had with prior editions of D&D. So it would be familiar. It's just a little bit different in the math, and, probably no more so than in other editions as you've made tweaks to it. For me, I started with 4th edition, so I had no baseline of hit points or healing surges or anything, or how any of that worked. So for me, starting with 4th edition, this is just how this worked. This is just how healing worked. This is just how hit points worked. I didn't even know that there was something different to do. So, so if you're brand new to D&D and you're coming into 4th edition, this is just the way it is. It's not really complicated. It just might be different if you have any prior experience. Next, we have trained skills, and this will be something a little different for every class out there. In prior editions, 3rd edition was the only edition that had skills. The earlier editions of the game didn't have skills. So you got skills with 3rd edition, and there's a lot of skills in 3rd edition. 4th edition doesn't have nearly as many skills as you have in 3rd edition. With 3rd edition, you did this thing where you got ranks at every level, and you would assign those ranks to the different skills in order to get better and better at those different skills. 4th edition has a different approach to it. There's fewer skills to work with, and you have a certain number of skills that you are trained in depending on what your class is. So for a Warlord, you could see it says, from the class skill list below, choose 4 trained skills at 1st level. So, and it gives you a list of athletics, diplomacy, endurance, heal, history, and intimidate. And you basically can choose 4 of those, and you will be trained in those skills. And what trained means is that you will get a +5 bonus when you use those skills on top of whatever other bonuses you have. So you get to be trained in 4 skills. Now, those skills that are in that list are not all the skills in 4th edition. Those are just the Warlord class skills. Those are the ones that a Warlord could be trained in. Every class will have a different list that they're working with. Some classes, it even tells you a specific one that says, like a Cleric, you will be trained in religion, and then you get to pick like 3 more from a list. So Warlord, you have complete flexibility. You just pick 4 from this list. Other classes, it'll tell you one that you're trained in, and then you can select from another list of them for the rest. But the trained skills gives you a +5 bonus on top of whatever other bonuses you get for it. And the last 2 things are the build options and the features, which I will look at next because it's on the next page and it expands on those. And so we'll look at those. And then you get a little bit of text to help you understand what a Warlord is and what your role might be. All the classes have the same structure to it. And then obviously there's some artwork to help you visualize what a Warlord might look like. So then on the next page, then we get into the details of the class and some of the class features and the things that you can do. The first part of that is the builds, and this was listed in the class traits, was that there's builds. Every class has 2 different builds available to you. There's a couple ways of looking at this. One, you can look at this as kind of like a subclass, because what it's doing is it's taking all the different options for in this case a Warlord, and it's picking a few that have a common theme and saying, what if you want to be an inspiring Warlord or you want to be a tactical Warlord? So it's not, it doesn't give you anything specific with the by saying you're an inspiring Warlord or a tactical Warlord, but it's telling you what choices to make to fit into that theme that it's describing as those 2 types of builds. You don't have to use those if you don't want to. You can go completely on your own and make your own choices and decide for yourself what feat and skills and powers you want to have for your character. or you can use these as your starting point and then swap out some of the things. So if you like one of the at-will powers that it mentions, but you'd really like to choose a different one, that's fine. They're just guidance. They're valuable is if you're new to 4th edition and you're just wanting to build a character, or you've never built a character of that class before, just use one of these builds because it's right there for you. It's all the choices are made. You don't have to spend any time reading through all the different powers, all the different feats. The skills are going to be the same no matter what class you are. It's the same list of skills, but you don't have to spend all that time to really get to know it all in order to make your choices. Just, understand, hey, what is an inspiring warlord? What is a tactical warlord? And, okay, I'll just do that. Let me just select all these things. And then you'll figure out the details as you're playing the game. And then as you create more characters of that class, you'll probably have a better feel for those powers once you get more familiar with it. But it's a great tool for starting when you're playing a class for the first time. Next, you have the class features. And this is really the stuff that you get. Just like any other edition of Dungeons and Dragons or other games, these are the things that you get as when you choose to play this class. And every class has a different set of features that you have for playing that. For a warlord, you get combat leader, so you and each ally within 10 squares who can see and hear you gain a +2 power bonus to initiative. Commanding presence, you get to choose one of these two presences, inspiring presence and tactical presence. And there's a bonus that you get for depending on which one you choose. And so right off the bat, by choosing one of those, you get something. But then also, if you look over at the powers that we'll take a look at in a second, you can see that some of them have inspiring presence and this one has tactical presence, which ties back to these. And so if you chose that you're going to have tactical presence, and then you use Warlord's Favor as your encounter power, in addition to what else you get with this power, you actually get a little something extra because it matches with your commanding presence that you've chosen. But you don't have to. If you could. I've had characters where I've chosen one of these because other classes have similar types of things where I've chosen one of the things and I get this bonus from it, but then I didn't really care for the power that gave me a little extra with that, and I ended up using a different power. So you could be a tactical presence warlord, but then decide that you really want Leaf of the Wind and Warlord's Favor is not the one for you. That's perfectly fine. So you still get a little something from it. And, at higher levels, when you're choosing powers, you may find that there's other ones that would fit. So you have that flexibility to do what you want. You're not locked into choosing that power. And then Inspiring Word is a power that you get as an encounter power, similar to what we saw with like Dragon Breath, where you have it's an encounter power that you can use twice per encounter. And so you just get that one as part of choosing the Warlord class. It stands by itself, is another feature that you have. And then we get into the powers. And at first level, you will choose 2 at-will powers. There are 4 in the player's handbook that you can choose from, and you will get to choose 2 of them. There are also 4 encounter powers. You will choose one of those. And then flipping ahead to the next page, there are 4 daily powers, and you will choose one of those. So when you're done, you will, in addition to your Inspiring Word, you will have 2 at-will powers, 1 encounter power, and 1 daily power. And that is your first level character. The rest of the pages for the Warlord and for the other classes, the rest of the pages that you have is all the other powers as you level up. So at second level, you'll pick another power. At third level, you'll pick a power. You'll notice there's no level 4 powers because at level 4, you don't get a power. So then at level 5, level 6, level 7, and then there's no level 8 and then level 9. So at every level where you do get to choose a power, there are more powers for you to choose from, and you can decide which one that you want. There's also stuff where you can retrain on lower level powers if you decide to do that. But you can see that at there, we're up to level 15 and, we go level 23 and all the way up to level 29. The game goes to level 30. So you have powers all the way up through the end of the game that you will be able to choose. And then you get your Paragon paths. And so at level 11, you will choose a Paragon path and you get things depending on which Paragon path you chose. And so at like level 11, level 12, and level 20, you will choose different things. So like if you were going to be a sword marshal, these are the powers that you would get at those different levels in here. And then epic destinies are different. They're not actually specific to the classes, so that those would come later. Oops, this went a little far ahead there. So, but you can see that you get these paragon paths. We will cover that in future videos, exactly what all that means. But these are the higher level things that you get to do where you've moved beyond just being a hero and having powers that you do, and you're really making choices that move you into that next level of awesomeness that your character is going to be. You'll also notice that there is a larger gap in between when you choose powers. Before we were like every 4th level there wasn't a power, but here now there's gaps in between. So like level 19, and there's nothing for level 20 or 21. There's nothing for and then level 24, and then you don't have a level 26. There's nothing for level 28. So there are some other gaps as you get higher and higher where you're choosing new powers less and less often with your levels. So and that's consistent across all the different classes. And that's the Warlord. And the key thing that I want to stress is that the structure of what we just talked about is the same. So whether you're creating a Warlord or a fighter or a Paladin or a wizard, the difficulty of creating that character is basically the same. So they're all very approachable. There's always this thing that if you're starting a role-playing game, being a spellcaster right out of the gate is not very easy normally. There's other things that you have to do. That you have to know about how you cast spells and things that make them a little bit more intimidating. They're not, I'm not saying they're hard or anything. It's just, they're a little intimidating is all. But with 4th edition, they really streamlined the rules on how you build a character so that every character is approachable from everybody. Anybody can play any of these, and there's not really much more difficulty in one from the other in both how you build a character and then how you would play that character during the game. The differences come in the specifics of what you can do. So how you do it is really similar, but what you do is different. And if you look at the at-will powers that you have for a Warlord, and you were to look at what those powers do and the types of bonuses they get and the circumstances of how they work, and some are healing, some are about moving enemies, about moving yourself, about doing area blasts, and there's lots of different things, and every class has some things that are very specific for that type of class based on what that class is. If you're a defender or a healer or a defender or a leader or a controller or a striker, what you do is going to be different in all of these powers. So what you do is very different amongst all the classes. How you do it is relatively similar, which makes every class very approachable. So with that said, that's the overview, and that's, we spent a lot of time on the Warlord. I'm not going to spend as much time on the other ones, but I do want to go through the other classes and just kind of get a feel for what they do and what's maybe a little bit different in some of the other ones as far as what they do, not necessarily how they do it. So let's flip ahead to our Cleric and go, you look, same thing, you got your class traits and all that same type of information that we saw for the Warlord is here. You have your 2 different builds. If you just want to play a Cleric and I don't have time to figure out what my options are, I'm just going to go and choose one of these and run with it. And like I said before, I will sometimes take and say, you know what, I like the devoted Cleric, that sounds good, but I want to choose a couple different powers. These are not all or nothing. This is just guides that you can take and decide then if you want to do something different with it. So that's something to keep in mind. They're just really to help you get started in playing the game just that much faster. The class features that you have, I want to point out a couple things from the Cleric that's interesting. So the first one you have is Channel Divinity. And if we look ahead to the next page where it has the class features you see that there's a Channel Divinity Divine Fortune and a Channel Divinity Turn Undead. And so, it looks like it's 2 powers, but both of those powers are Channel Divinity and they are encounter powers. So Channel Divinity is the power. It's not, so the subtitle that you have to it is just a different variation of Channel Divinity. So if you're playing a Cleric, and you have Channel Divinity is one of the class features that you have, you get both of these, all right? But as an encounter power, you're casting Channel Divinity. You decide which one you cast, but once you've cast one, that encounter power is now gone. You can't do Channel. So if you did Channel Divinity Divine Fortune during your encounter, you could not in the same encounter then do Channel Divinity Turn Undead because you've already spent your Channel Divinity encounter power. When you look at the feats, there are actually other Channel Divinity powers available to you if you meet the prerequisites. So you could have a whole list of Channel Divinity powers that you could do, but they're all the same power. They're all Channel Divinity, and you would choose which one that you would do. Very similar to casting spells in that, you choose you prepare a spell and you choose what ones you're going to prepare, and then you would once you cast it, it's gone. You can't do it. So that's just a little nuance with the Channel Divinity. But you can kind of figure that out because it has the title. They're all called Channel Divinity. They just have a subtitle, but just understand that Channel Divinity is the power, and it is once per encounter. Healing Word is another class feature, encounter power. This one is like we saw with some other ones where you can use that power twice per encounter instead of just once. Notice that there's the healing keyword, which means that it's going to heal. And so if you're doing different things, like one of the class features, if you have a power that has the healing keyword, then you get to add your wisdom modifier to that power. So that's another class feature you have here. And then you have the other powers that you can choose. So again, 2 at-will powers, 1 encounter power, 1 daily power. Same as we saw with the Warlord. I'll just mention there is reference to choosing a deity, and there's more information about all these deities in chapter 2 of the book. So you can really dig into which deity you think is appropriate for your cleric, if that's what you're going to play. And then all the different powers all the way up to level 30 and the Paragon paths for your cleric. Fighter, again, same. Remember, our fighter is our defender, and they're going to be very strong. They've got a +2 to fortitude. They only get 3 trained skills. So the Warlord got 4. I think the cleric got religion +3 more. So, but the fighter is more about the brute force, and so they don't actually get as many skills. And you can tell from looking at those skills that a fighter can be trained in athletics, endurance, intimidate, and streetwise, and heal. So those are all things you would naturally associate with a defender. This fighter character. Those are things that would likely be things that they would do. They got a lot of armor and weapon proficiencies, and then if we look at our class features. The interesting thing is, so if you look at the fighters and melee weapons, there's this whole table with information about you can take your fighter and you can kind of specialize your fighter with a certain type of weapon. And it has a table here that goes into, where your bonuses are going to get if you're using that type of weapon. Now, this may not be obvious initially, but as you're looking at the powers that come up later, you'll notice that just like with the Warlord, where we had that tactical presence and the inspiring presence as a little bonus that you would get if you had those, with your fighter, if you chose, like in this example, if you're wielding a polearm or a heavy blade, then you get this extra bonus to it. So that's another thing that you're choosing here. So if you're going to you decide if you're going to specialize in a polearm, then that's the weapon that you would carry. And then when you had a power that you used that specified that particular type of weapon, then you get a little something extra. So here you're going to be wielding an axe or a hammer, you get that little extra. So another layer to what you get to do by choosing a fighter. And again, this goes back to that the classes are different. What the classes can do are very different in your choices that you have and the decisions you make about what that character means and how you put that class together. All of our other powers, Paragon paths, and then we get to a Paladin. A Paladin is another defender. There's, again, same stuff. I didn't mention it with the cleric, but you see the Paladin also has a holy symbol as their implement. So if you're making a Paladin and you carry a holy symbol with you, you can channel your spells through that holy symbol and you get a proficiency bonus for that. Notice the bonus to defense, you get a +1 to all 3 of the other defenses. So that's helpful, again, because you're that defender, you want to have a lot of good defenses. You'll be right up there in melee. Here's a case just like the cleric had. You get trained in religion that is basically you're forced to take the training in religion, but then you get to choose 3 more from this list: diplomacy, endurance, heal, history, insight, intimidate, and religion again. Now religion is listed there, but you can't choose it twice. So you're told that you're trained in religion, and so you get your +5 bonus there. You can't choose it again down here and then take get a +10 bonus. It doesn't work that way. So basically you would just choose from the other ones in this one. And then looking at our build options, we have an avenging paladin and a protecting paladin. With those choices, you also have a deity that you would choose as a paladin here. And then we get into some of the paladin's got some really cool special class features. Notice there's a channel divinity, just like we were talking about with the cleric, but these are different. This is channel divinity divine metal and channel divinity divine strength. And so it works exactly the same though, that, channel divinity is the power, and whichever one you choose to use is up to you. But once you use channel divinity, you're done with it until the end of the encounter. Divine Challenge is an at-will power that you get separate from your other at-will powers that you'll choose. You will get Divine Challenge, and you will get Lay on Hands. And then the Lay on Hands is also a special in that you can only use it a certain number of times, even though it is at-will, but it is a minor action, and you can only use it a certain number of times per day. But it's a power that is just given to you separate from the powers that you will choose at first level, which are these. Again, 4 at-will powers, you would choose 2. You get 4 encounter powers, you will choose 1. And then there are 3 daily powers, and you'll choose 1 of those. So you could, I'm hoping that as you're looking through these, we're seeing that there are differences in these classes, in what they do. The structure of how you put the character together is very similar, but the choices that you make and the things that those characters will do is definitely very different. Our ranger is a striker, so now we get a striker. We haven't looked at a striker yet, but very similar in how you're going to put this together. Here's an interesting, so the trained skills here, you get to choose dungeoneering or nature. You choose one of those, and then you choose 4 more from this list. So you could technically choose dungeoneering and then choose nature from down here, but it's basically forcing you to choose one of those 2, and then you can choose from the rest of the list. So if you choose dungeoneering, again, you can't choose dungeoneering twice. If you choose nature, you can't choose nature twice, but you could choose dungeoneering as your choice up here, and then when you're down here choosing the next 4, you could choose the other one down there if you wanted to go that route. Got Archer Ranger, 2-blade Ranger. So this is where you decide for your Ranger, are you going to be more of a melee character, or you're going to be a ranged fighter? So you can decide depending on what ability scores you're going to emphasize and which powers you're going to choose. You would decide which way you want to go with it. Similar to some of the other ones, you've got a fighting style. So you have an Archer fighting style and a 2-blade fighting style. And then if you look at the powers, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there are, maybe I'm not seeing it on here. I thought there was, let's see, fighting style. Because you're focused on range attacks, you gain defensive mobility as a bonus feat. So you get an extra feat with that one. I guess this isn't like the other ones where you have special powers, things that you would get at the power level. This just gives you an ability at right here. So you choose, again, it kind of goes back to these 2 different types of builds. If you are going to be a ranged fighter as an archer, or more of a melee fighter, and there's a bonus that you get there. The Hunter's Quarry it's almost similar, like sneak attack in a way, but it works a little bit differently. But you essentially would choose an enemy, and then you get to deal extra damage against that enemy, because you're basically saying this enemy in particular is the one I'm going after. So you get that, and then you get a bonus to your attack rolls if you are the closest of your allies to that enemy. So some different things there as well. 4 at-will powers to choose from, 4 encounter powers to choose from, and 4 daily powers to choose from for the Ranger. Next, we have the Rogue. The Rogue is going to be definitely our shifty character. Trying to see stealth and thievery. So this one you get stealth and thievery as trained skills, and then you get to select 4 more from the list. So you get quite a few skills as the rogue, because they're giving you stealth and thievery, and then 4 more on top of that. So you're going to end up with 6 different skills that you're trained in, which is pretty impressive. And a +2 to reflex. And Brawny Rogue, Trickster Rogue as the builds. First Strike is nice. You have combat advantage against any creatures that have not yet acted in this counter. Remember, our strikers are the ones that are kind of keeping everybody off balance. And so that's the type of thing that basically says, hey, if I'm going before you go, then I'm going to get an advantage on that roll. I'm going to get combat advantage on that roll. So that comes in handy. Rogue tactics. This one is like the other thing we were talking about, where you choose Artful Dodger or Brutal Scoundrel. And when you look at the powers, you will see there's a little bonus thing. If you choose this power and you're an Artful Dodger, you get something extra. If you choose this power and you're a Brutal Scoundrel, you get a little something extra. You don't have to be a Brutal Scoundrel to choose this power. You don't have to be an Artful Dodger to choose this one. It just gives you a little something extra if that is what you have. Sneak attack is the common thing for rogues in many editions of the game. If you're coming from other editions, then sneak attack will definitely sound familiar. It's got a couple requirements on what it is, but once per round, you when you have combat advantage against an enemy and you deal damage, you get to deal extra damage. So at first level, that's going to be 2d6 extra damage on top of the normal damage that you would deal for that as your rogue. So pretty cool. Then, and I think it's important to note too that, some of these classes exist in other editions of the game. And so, if you've played a rogue in another edition of the game, you're going to see similar types of things. The types of things that you would do with a rogue in 4th edition is going to be very similar to the things that you would do with a rogue in other editions of the game. The way you do it, how you do it here is really where the variation comes in when we're talking about powers and how you build your character and stuff is very, very much more streamlined than what you might have in some of the other editions. And we'll dig through all of these in future videos. Warlock is another striker. I know some folks who really love to play Warlocks. The implements are proficient in both rods and wands, which is nice. And you get 4 trained skills for the Warlock. There's Deceptive Warlock and Scourge Warlock. One thing that's interesting with the Warlock, if there was a... and this only is true as far as like the player's handbook, because once what kind of this is arcane power. So once like the arcane power book came out, there was more options available as far as the powers that you could choose from. But with the Warlock, you get Eldritch Blast as an at-will power. But then you choose a pact. And depending on the pact that you choose, you get something extra with it. So you choose this pact, and if you choose the Fey Pact, you get these things. If you choose the Infernal Pact, you get these things. And you turn the Star Pact, you get these things. You have fewer choices in the powers that you can choose, because you're making that choice at the front end when you choose your pact. And I'll flip to it in a second, and you'll be able to see that your choices are a little more restrictive as a Warlock, because you're locked into which pact you chose. So I'll look at that in just a second. There are a couple other features. So Prime Shot, if you're nearer to the target, then if none of your allies are nearer to the target than you get a bonus. That sounds similar to what the Ranger had. On your turn, if you move at least 3 squares, then you gain concealment until the end of your turn. And then you have the Warlock's Curse, which I don't remember all the specifics of it, but bottom line is you can place a curse on an enemy that's near to you, and then when you get to deal extra damage to that enemy that you've identified. You can use implements, and then we get into the powers. So you'll notice with the powers that it has, in parentheses, it says which pact that power is for. So Dire Radiance is part of the Star Pact. And then Eldritch Blast, it says all. And then Eye Bite is Fey, and Hellish Rebuke is Infernal. So what that means is that everyone gets Eldritch Blast, and it's listed as all. And then you choose Fey, Infernal, or Star as your pact, and then you basically just get that one. So if you chose Infernal, you would get Eldritch Blast because it's for all, And then you would get Hellish Rebuke because it's for the Infernal. So you would not do Eye Bite and you would not do Dire Radiance. Those are for the other packs. So you're kind of, you don't have as many choices. Your choice that you made was which pact you're with, and then the powers you get are tied to that. Now, like I said, some of that is just because this is the player's handbook, and so you're dealing with a smaller list of powers. Once the Arcane Powers book came out, there are additional pacts that you can do, but then there's additional powers that, so you have a few more options available. For your encounter spells, you get one encounter spell at first level, but there are 4 here, but there's 2 infernal ones. So if you had chosen infernal as your pact, you would be able to choose between those 2. But if you chose Fey as your pact, well, then Witchfire is the power that you're going to get. And if you chose Dreadful Word, then Dreadful Word is then Dreadful Word is what you're going to get. If I am misreading that, let me know. If this is more like the other things where you can choose things that don't line up. So, where if I was a Star Pact and I chose this power, does that mean I just don't get this extra little bonus thing? Or am I locked in and I can only do that one? So that's the way I read it, is that this one, because unlike the other ones where it just had the little bonus down here, these actually specifically say which pact they're for. And so I read that to mean that that's the ones you're stuck with. Anyway, love to hear in the comments. If I've gotten that wrong, let me know and correct me on that one. But that's someone that's played Warlocks more than I have might be able to set that straight. So that is the Warlock. And we've got one more to look at. We already looked at our Warlord. And so let's move ahead to the last class in the player's handbook, and that is our Wizard. And I'm glad this one is last because this is the one that has just a slight difference in some of the things. This is our only controller that we have in the player's handbook. You have orbs, staffs, and wands. And everything again should look very similar to anybody who's putting this together. It's going to follow that same format. And then you get your class features, your implement mastery. There's the Orb of Imposition, the Staff of Defense. So you can specialize in which of those that you want to use. Sorry, there's one other one. There's the Wand of Accuracy. So remember, you're proficient in orbs, staffs, and wands. And then you kind of based on that, you choose which of the mastery you have, whether you have an orb, a staff, or a wand. And then you get a little something extra for having mastery of that particular implement. Then you have cantrips, and you can see that you get Ghost Sound, Light, Mage Hand, and Prestidigitation. These are at-will cantrips. You can use them anytime, and they never go away. So just like a cantrip from another version of the game, you will they work exactly the same. You just can cast them as much as you want, as many times as you want. You get ritual casting. We will talk about rituals in another video. It's a whole thing unto itself, but you get a ritual book and you can copy rituals into that book and then use those. They have longer casting times. They have restrictions around them, but there's a lot of the things that you would see as kind of your non-combat spells from other editions are rituals that you would cast in 4th edition. So you get access to do that. And then you have spellbook. So this is where things are just a little bit different from the other ones. Remember, with the other classes, you get 2 at-will powers, you get 1 encounter power, and you get 1 daily power. So you still get 2 at-will spells. There are 5 to choose from, and you would get 2. So just like any other edition of the game, you're choosing which spells you want, and you would choose 2 of these at-will spells, and those are the ones that you're going to have in your spell book, and you can use those as your at-will spells. With your encounter spells, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to choose from. You will choose one of those, and that is your encounter spell that you have. So any spellcaster from other editions knows that you're having to make choices about what spells you have. You're doing the same thing here. You're choosing which spells you have, and it's the same structure and procedure that you would use for picking your powers for the other classes. So there's nothing more complicated here. The only thing that adds an extra layer to a wizard is that a wizard has a spell book, and that spell book allows them to have more daily powers than they would otherwise. So you still have one daily power that is available to you. So like at first level, you get one daily power, and every class has one daily power available to them. And a wizard can only cast one daily power, but you have a spell book that allows you to copy 2 daily powers into it. So at level 1, you have 4 daily powers to choose from. You can choose 2 of them to put in your spell book. And then at the beginning of any given day, you would decide which of those you're going to prepare. And then that's your daily power you have for that day. So in your spell book, you might have Acid Arrow and you might have Sleep. When you wake up in the morning and you're about to start an adventuring day, you would say, you know what, I think I'm going to prepare Acid Arrow. And then during the day, if a situation arrives, you're like, man, I wish I could cast Sleep. Well, you can't because you didn't prepare it. It's in your spell book, but you didn't prepare it for that day. And this is very, very similar to what you have in other editions of the game, where you have to prepare certain spells. And once you prepare that spell, that's what you're stuck with. And you can't prepare the same spell more than once. So as you level up, you will be allowed to prepare more spells. So like at like level 2, you will get to choose another daily power, and you can prepare 2 daily powers for the day, 2 daily spells for the day, but that's it. And you can't prepare the same one. You can't prepare Acid Arrow twice. You have to choose 2 different ones. So in your spell book, when you get to level 2, you would have Acid Arrow, Sleep, and then you would have likely Expeditious Retreat and Featherfall, because where normally you would choose 1 power with a wizard, because you have your spell book, you get to choose 2 and you put them in your spell book. But then again, every day you can only prepare a number of spells equal to the number of daily spells that you would be allowed to use. And so at first level, you're only allowed to use 1. You would have 2 in your spell book, you prepare 1, and that's the one you have. At level 2, you would have more in your spell book, but you're only allowed to cast 2, and so you'd have to prepare 2 spells each day. Choose which 2 you want it to be. I probably made that sound way more complicated than it really is. It just means that for a wizard with your daily spells, you choose 2 dailies instead of the normal 1 that you would get for other classes. They go in your spell book and you prepare 1 or 2 or whatever it is each day, depending on what level you're at. If you're coming from another edition of Dungeons & Dragons, it's exactly the same way that it works in other ones. You have a spell book, you decide how many spells you can prepare based on your level, and that's the spells you have for that day. Works the exact same way. All right, I hope I didn't completely muddy all the waters on the spell casting for the wizard, because it is not very complicated. It's just a little extra detail. No more of an extra detail than you had with some of the other powers that were out there. There is at the end of this, we have the epic destinies. I'm not going to go into the epic destinies. The bottom line is that the epic destinies are when you reach level 21, you choose an epic destiny. An epic destiny is not tied to a specific class. It's tied to the character itself. What's the next thing that this character is going to do? Really turning that character into a superhero, if you will. There are prerequisites to different ones. Like an archmage, you do have to be a wizard if you want to be an archmage, but the other ones, I think the other ones are mostly, so like you just have to be 21st level, the Eternal Seeker, just 21st level. And that's the ones you get here. Deadly Trickster, this one 21st level, but you got to have dexterity and some other things in there. So there are prerequisites for them. But, and then in some of the other books that will come out later, they have even more to choose from, which is nice. But these are really the things that start moving your character into just being an epic character. It's right there in the name. So, and there we go. That is classes. I know this was a lengthy video, but there's a lot of classes. There's a lot of detail, and I didn't even dig into the real meat of a lot of them. I just kind of was going through at a high level what these classes are. I really wanted to focus on how they work, because I think it's really important to understand that in 4th edition, the way the classes work is very similar. How you put the characters characters together is very similar. How you play the characters is very similar, but what the characters can do is very, very different. And as you dig into the details, you really see that. So anyway, that's what that is. In future videos, I will put together, we'll do some character builds. We will dig into some of the powers themselves, and I'm hoping to do some demos of those powers. I'll pick some out that we can go to a map and actually show it. I don't know that that'll be the next videos, but at some point down the road, we will do that, and we'll really dig into different aspects of each of these classes and some of those builds. And I also want to do some builds that are against type. You know, everybody talks about like a dwarf fighter, because the dwarf has bonuses that really complement what the fighter needs. But I would be interested to see, what if I wanted to play a halfling fighter, you know, and, you know, where you don't get those bonuses, or they're to a different thing, and you kind of want to, but you still want to have an effective character. That's fine, you know, and, you know, you can do that just like you could in any other game. You just, you build it the way that you want to build it. And then, you make, adjustments to what your powers that you choose. And, anyway, we'll talk through all of that and the differences and how you would go about doing such a thing. But that's it. Hopefully that was an overview that helped you. I will put some chapters for this one, because I know this is a long video. So I'll put chapters out there so you can skip ahead to the different classes as we looked at them. And hopefully it provides some help as you're trying to get an idea for what kind of class you would want to play. And the different options that you have for what you're envisioning. So I do hope you found it helpful. If I got things wrong, put them in the comments constructively. If I overlooked something, if I glossed over something important, if there's something specific you would like me to cover in a future video, all that stuff, put it in the comments. Love to hear from you and what you have, and I will read those and definitely try to incorporate some of that into the future videos. So, but hopefully you found it helpful. I appreciate it, and let me know everything in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Check out the newsletter if you want. I have not updated the newsletter in quite some time, but please go ahead and subscribe to it anyway. Maybe I'll get it back around to it. So that's what we've got going on. We will continue this journey in the next video. So until next time, take care.